They say the foundation of a great fortune is stone. They're wrong. It's paper, secured by silence and signed in generational hubris. I built the Vance name not with raw material, but with ink and ambition, crafting a lineage so airtight even the IRS couldn't find a single leak. My son, Sterling, was supposed to be the capstone of this edifice. He believed he could erase the architect and claim the blueprint for himself. He mistook my dignity for a price tag. And at his wedding, I gave him the only thing I had left to offer: a perfectly designed demolition. My name is Elias Vance. I was neither a lawyer nor a detective. I was, for 4 decades, the invisible man who engineered the structural reinforcement of Texas fortunes. My official title was Consultant in Fiscal Casuistry and Succession, which meant I found the legal loopholes through which empires of oil, land, and finance passed from one generation to the next without ever paying the price. It was a subtle, necessary evil. I had learned that the only thing stronger than money was lineage. Money can be lost. A bloodline, theoretically, cannot. My only son, Sterling Vance, was the embodiment of the new arrogance. Swift tech wealth grafted onto the old name I had painstakingly polished. He didn't understand the difference between acquiring assets and inheriting them. His marriage to Charlotte Thorne was not a fairy tale. It was, as I noted in my personal ledger, a hostile takeover of social capital. The merging of his liquid wealth with the Thorne family's entrenched land inheritance, their legendary Black Gold Trust, promised to create a financial monolith. The event took place at Shadow Creek, a colossal estate I myself had secured under a trust for an old, now deceased client years ago, and which Sterling had rented for an obscene sum. The irony was so rich, it was almost palatable. The ballroom was a vast, echoing chasm of imported Venetian marble and aggressively polished gold, populated by 300 guests. Every face in that room represented not just $1,000 million, but generations of silence and strategic marriages. I watched them, these human variables, with the cold eye of a mathematician. I was seated at the head table, in the spot reserved for the father of the groom. It was the seat of pride, of history, the only place in that room that could not, by custom, be purchased. It was, I realize now, the last piece of territory I truly held. That's when Sterling appeared, right before the toasts. A man so handsome his arrogance looked like confidence. He was accompanied by Senator Harrington, a political figure he was slavishly courting for a future infrastructure deal. Sterling did not meet my gaze. He acted with the polite yet lethal detachment of those who view human beings as furniture, easily rearranged. "Father, I have a situation." His voice was a cold whisper, tailored for boardrooms, and designed to evaporate the moment it left his lips. The senator had a last-minute scheduling conflict. He needs to be at this table for the official photos. Protocol, you understand? He subtly gestured toward my seat. "I've moved you to table 14. It's right next to the kitchen entrance. More convenient for you, I imagine. Easier access to the port and cognacs you prefer." It wasn't a suggestion. It was an execution order. He wasn't just ejecting me from the chair. He was symbolically ejecting me from the family history, assigning me to the table of subordinates, the pariahs, in front of 300 witnesses. I was the past he sought to discard, to make his present shine in the eyes of the Thornes. I remember the texture of the antique velvet on the back of the chair, cool beneath my fingertips. I remember the precise, almost imperceptible tilt of Marjorie Thorne's head, Charlotte's mother. A movement of glacial satisfaction. Sterling's move had earned him her approval. I rose slowly. My heart, a muscle that had weathered decades of corporate betrayal, did not accelerate. My mind, however, clicked instantly into risk analysis mode. A man does not destroy his own foundation, even a personal one, without cause. Sterling sought to demonstrate he was no longer the man who needed his father's strategic genius. He had just made an error in calculation. I pulled from my inner coat pocket the heavy vellum envelope I had prepared weeks in advance, sealed with the silver crest, the sigillum Vance, I had used throughout my career. It was my brand, my quiet statement of authority. Sterling, this is my gift. My voice was level, almost impossibly calm. I believe it is of incalculable value because it is a correction. I handed it to him. The paper was heavy with unspoken consequence. Keep it until the end of the evening. It is the founding act of your new lineage. He raised a single, dismissive eyebrow, a mannerism he'd perfected while negotiating hostile bids. He tucked the envelope carelessly under a massive bouquet of white roses, hiding it, already dismissing it, and resumed his conversation with the senator. The incident, for him, was over. I walked the distance to table 14. The ballroom was vast, and the walk felt like a geological era. Every step was deliberate, observed. The silence of the attendees, the collective, frozen uncertainty, was more deafening than any shout. The silver crest on the back of my old chair seemed to mock me now, a monument to my obsolescence. Table 14 was precisely where Sterling had promised, nestled against the service archway. I could smell the steam and a sharp odor of burning sugar from the 5-tier wedding cake in the service hall. I sat, an island of calm in a sea of opulent noise. My phone vibrated almost immediately. A text from Sterling's administrative assistant, a cold digital emissary for his contempt. Saw the check, Father. Thanks for the first installment of my allowance. I assume it's indexed to inflation. Don't make a scene. It's my day. He hadn't opened the envelope. He hadn't touched it. He hadn't even paused to consider what I had actually said. His belief that every human transaction was purely financial was his first fatal error. There was no check. His contempt was complete. He had mocked my dignity, mistaking it for a monetary value. That digital laughter, those 32 words, was the equilibrium point I was looking for. I spent the next hour simply observing, not the guests, not the bride, but the architectural structure of my son's fortune. I had been planning for this day for months, but not for the wedding, for the succession. Sterling had a 4-year-old daughter, Isabella. She was the linchpin. She was the sine qua non condition for unlocking the black gold trust of the Thorns and the Vance Legacy Fund. Billions in liquid and land assets. These funds were locked down by clauses I myself had drafted decades ago, stipulating that the heir must be biologically descended from the bloodline. Without a biological heir, the funds automatically reverted to a series of charities and distant, inactive branches of the family. The purpose was to prevent frivolous squandering. The initial thought of revealing an adultery scandal was amateurish. Adultery is manageable. It's a divorce clause. The true flaw, the existential threat to Sterling's power, was paternity. I initiated contact with my closest associate, Donna Rios. She wasn't just an analyst, she was a former geneticist turned forensic audit consultant. Her expertise was tracing omissions, the things people forgot to record. Dana, forget the bank accounts. They're too clean. I want everything about the period of Isabella's conception 4 years ago. I want travel anomalies, health records, anything unusual. I remember sitting in the dark of my office a week prior, reviewing Dana's initial report. The official record showed Charlotte had spent the crucial 2 months at a health retreat in Vermont, a place known for its excellent seclusion. But the forensic analysis of her credit card usage, the most banal, traceable act, had revealed a cancelled flight purchase to Istanbul, followed by an 8-day, non-documented stay at an ultra-discreet fertility clinic in the Cayman Islands. All expenses were routed through a maze of shell accounts. "It wasn't an abortion, Elias." Donna's voice had been clinical over the phone. "It was an attempt at in vitro fertilization." Charlotte was covering all her bases. Sterling's medical records indicate a very low motility count around that time, a secret she kept. The clinic's specialist, Dr. Julian Cole, is notorious for providing high-quality, unrelated samples for replacement lineage transactions. She ensured she would have a child to secure the trust, but not necessarily a child with Sterling. Charlotte, desperate to access the Thorn billions and consolidate Sterling's new empire, had guaranteed her access to the fortune through biological fraud, executed just before their legal marriage. She was engaged in a multi-billion-dollar lie, and Sterling, blinded by ambition and the social cachet of the Thorn name, had never, ever checked. The sheer scale of the deception was magnificent. I saw the logic instantly. It wasn't hatred. It was pure, calculated survival on Charlotte's part. She secured the legacy, but by doing so, she had provided me with the ultimate leverage. I had spent the last week securing the irrefutable proof, a legally obtained DNA test, masked as a routine genealogical survey for one of my trusts. The sample had been taken weeks ago during a routine physical for Isabella. The process had been complex, involving a series of lawyers and judicial approvals, all disguised in layers of paperwork. The result had arrived that very morning. The report, a single, decisive page, was now sealed within the vellum envelope. If this fact were revealed, the Thorns would not only reject the marriage in Charlotte, but the Vance Legacy Fund, the foundation I had spent 30 years protecting, would legally bypass Sterling and evaporate, falling into the hands of a distant university endowment. This was total ruin, social, emotional, and financial. The Master of Ceremonies, a minor television personality named Trent, reached the segment for the final, sentimental toasts. I watched him from table 14. He was nervous, eager to please. I knew he was the weak link. I had paid his assistant $5,000, wired quietly before the appetizers, with a single, typewritten instruction. Ensure the MC opens the silver-sealed envelope immediately after the main toast. Read only the first line of the document inside. Do not elaborate. The money bought his curiosity and the certainty of his cooperation. "And now," Trent's voice boomed, slightly too loud for the microphone, "the final, most precious gift, from the father of the groom, Mr. Elias Vance." Sterling, who was just settling down after an oily toast to the senator, straightened up. His forced smile evaporated, replaced by a flash of sheer, cold terror. He thought I was about to make a scene, a drunken spectacle. He feared I would seek revenge with a ridiculous check or a rambling, pathetic monologue. He was so profoundly wrong. Trent fumbled with the envelope. He broke the wax seal, the small, sharp sound echoing in the momentary lull of the ballroom. He pulled out the document. I had placed a note in a large, elegant font above the official DNA report, containing the exact words I wanted him to read. Trent's eyes darted down, scanning the sentence, then up to Sterling, suddenly realizing the gravity of the script he'd just been handed. His voice, initially professional and bright, stuttered, thick with terrifying confusion, as he read the only content I wanted the room to hear. "Sterling, this is your wedding gift. The DNA test results for your daughter, Isabella." The silence that followed was immense. a physical weight pressing down on every breath. It was louder than any thunder. It was the sound of a foundation crumbling. The flashbulbs of the official photographer froze. Marjorie Thorne, the matriarch, was the first to break, dropping her crystal champagne flute. The sound of the glass shattering on the marble floor was the only honest noise of the entire evening. Charlotte's composure shattered instantly, her hands slamming onto the table, the perfect porcelain of her aristocratic demeanor cracking to reveal raw, desperate panic. Sterling, the great magnate, didn't move. He simply stared at the open envelope, then at his wife, then across the vast room to me at my distant table. His face was a study in profound, silent realization. I hadn't sought revenge. I had executed an audit. I had exposed the lie he hadn't taken the time to verify. The MC wisely fell silent, sensing the cataclysm he had just unleashed. But the damage was done. The truth, once released in a room full of financial predators, doesn't need immediate proof to become fact. The knowledge was enough. The murmur of confusion instantly morphed into the roar of speculation. The sharks were circling. I stood up from table 14. I walked back toward the main doors. The crowd parted for me this time, not with contempt, but with a sudden, cautious deference. I was no longer the inconvenient old man. I was the agent of collapse. 2 hours later, I was back in my office. A secured, anonymous space above a quiet Boston street. I sat in the darkness, the only light coming from the city outside. I didn't turn on the lamp. I watched the lights of the world Sterling thought he owned. The phone rang. It was Sterling. I recognized the private, restricted number instantly. His voice was thin, utterly devoid of the polished arrogance he usually wore. "Father, the Thorne lawyers are here. They've brought the trust documents. Everything is blocked. Charlotte is..." She confessed. "They're taking Isabella. Why? Why this level of cruelty?" I smiled, a cold, joyless smile that felt alien on my face. "Cruelty?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper in the dark office. "Cruelty is throwing your father to the kitchen table to look good for the senator. I offered you honor, Sterling, and you assumed it was a check. You saw me as an obstacle. You removed the wrong man." I leaned forward, my elbows resting on the desk, looking at the city lights. "Your marriage, Sterling, was a structure built on a lie, a design flaw Charlotte introduced. You thought you could discard the architect of your life. I simply proved that a single design flaw can bring down the entire building. This was not about hatred. This was about correction." He was silent for a long moment. I could hear, faintly, the distant sounds of Shadow Creek, the party dissolving into hysterical arguments. The dream was ending. "Who are you?" he whispered finally. It was a question devoid of threat, a question of philosophical exhaustion after glimpsing the abyss. He wasn't seeking money, he was seeking understanding. I didn't answer the question aloud. I just hung up. The silence of my office returned, complete and unbroken. I sent one last text message, short, precise, the final period on the affair. "Someone who saw the price of your arrogance, the equilibrium point." I turned off the phone. I hadn't destroyed his world for money. I had destroyed it so that the foundational truth I had spent 40 years defending, the principle that lineage must be pure, could continue to stand. He was gone, a consequence of his own failed mathematics. If stories like this linger with you, stay. There's always another secret waiting to be told. Subscribe, and let's uncover them, one confession at a time.